Okay, we're in financial foundations now, the end of week 6. We've got 2 more weeks of material to get through, and then it'll be time for the final exam. And remember, we've already done the test over the first 4 weeks, or you should have done that already. If you haven't, you're a couple weeks late, so get in there and get that done. There will be another test at the end of week 8 about weeks 5, 6, 7, and 8. So all this stuff that we're doing now will be covered under the next unit test. And then the final would be the last thing you'd have to do before we wrap up this term, right after the week after Memorial Day. So we talked a little bit on Tuesday about things like fraud and what happens to a budget. If you're in trouble, how do you reduce expenses? We talked about something called the step down method very briefly. Anybody have any questions about any of those materials?
No.
Because the goal today is to concentrate on some big ticket item purchases, buying a car, buying a house. For a lot of Americans, buying a home is a big deal. It signifies, for families, it signifies some stability. If you're gonna buy a home in a certain neighborhood, a lot of times for families, it's done because of schools, right? So where you go to look to buy a home, where can you find your first home? That can really be a challenge for new couples or young families. Buying a car can be a challenge too, but it's not nearly as much of one because we're not talking about the same kind of magnitude of expense. So I'm going to talk to start off with here mostly about the housing aspect. And I don't know if anybody owns a home or has looked to buy a home. Anybody have any idea what the typical value of a home in Hamilton County is?
$130,000.
You are way short.
230,000.
Keep going. Add another 100.
Mine's not worth that much.
Well, and this has been, hopefully everybody can see this now. Maybe not. And this is from Zillow. If you know the Zillow app, they're all about studying houses and getting houses that are for sale listed on the market. $333,000 and change is the typical average home in Hamilton County. Now that's, if you look at the southern third of Hamilton County, Cromwell, Fishers, over into Fortville around Geist, those numbers are inflated by a lot of the homes in those neighborhoods, in those towns. You go to the northern part of Hamilton County, it's a different market almost completely. Now, you're still going to find a lot of high-end homes around Morse Reservoir and Cicero. But one of the biggest challenges for new home buyers in Hamilton County is price. And even if you look at just the last 4 years, 5 years, okay, May 2016, $281,000. It's gone up 50 grand in basically 5 years. And so if you go for a traditional mortgage, you're going to have money to put down as a down payment. Do you know what the amount of the down payment often is in a traditional mortgage? 20% of the value of the home. So 20% of $333,000 is $66,000. I don't know very many people at all that have that kind of cash sitting around to put down on a home. So what a lot of, especially first-time home buyers, they're just not going to be in that position. And Hamilton County is an extreme example of that. Let's see. Compared to Marion County, Indiana. One county to the south, look at the average value there. It's dropped significantly, 180,000, 181,000 roughly. So $150,000 difference just by going to one county south. Well, there's a lot more variety of homes in Marion County, that's for sure. All right. So you're going to have more to choose from. Anybody live over around Anderson?
No.
Anderson is in Madison County, one county to the east of here, $129,400 basically. Significantly less money to live in that area of Indiana. Any idea why the homes would be so much less around there? What's that? Not very many jobs. That's a really excellent point, Brianna. Anderson has over the years kind of fallen on hard times with the changes in the automotive industry and all the plants the factories that have moved out. Your dad and your grandpa used to.
Well, my dad was born in Anderson, but my grandpa worked at the college.
Okay, yeah. GM was a General Motors town. It was considered that for years. I was born in Anderson, believe it or not, but we only lived there for a year.
There was a Nyberg automotive plant in Anderson.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You're
Made really high end vehicles, and then they sold.
Huh, wow. Was that your family, Jonathan?
It wasn't. It probably was somebody in my family.
Yeah,
I didn't see any of the money for it.
I hear you.
They were really nice cars.
So value of the home, that might determine where you end up living if you're looking to buy a house. So in the materials that you guys have, there are some handouts that we're going to talk about here for a second. Sure. Take notes on your phone. So this is one of the handouts that's in there. Never mind the unit numbers because it's from somebody else's compilation of materials. there are a lot of different options to get a mortgage. Mortgage is what you, that's the home loan. That's what they're called. It's called a mortgage. So a lot of different ways to buy a home. There are other low down payment loans. You can rent to buy in some cases if you find the right seller. The problem in our market right now is that there are not enough homes for sale for the number of people that want to buy a home. So what happens to the price in that situation? Goes up. Yeah. You have more demand than you have supply. It's a basic supply and demand situation. More people want to buy a home than there are homes available. So get into a bidding war, potentially, 4 or 5 people bidding on the same house. That's going to automatically ratchet the price up. It's great if you're a seller. That's why they call it a seller's market, right? Because the sellers, people that have homes for sale, stand to benefit from that kind of competition. But before you start looking, there's some basic education that would be very beneficial for anybody that's thinking about buying a home. Fannie Mae, that's not a person, even though it sounds like it is. Fannie Mae is actually a nickname for a federal agency. I think it's Federal National Mortgage Association or something like that. So the Fannie Mae Foundation, they exist solely to help people get mortgages. So they've got their own home buying guide, all kinds of stuff to consider. So if you've done what we've been talking about, if you've got your credit score in order and you've got your budget laid out, this next item here should be a no-brainer. Set your payment limits. How much are you willing to pay? How much can you afford a month? Right? How do you figure that out? The easiest way, and this is going to sound a lot like the stuff we were doing last period in geometry by using online calculators, is to find a mortgage calculator. So lots of different ones available. Took me 10 seconds to type in mortgage calculator. This is the one that came up. I'm still in the Google search screen. If you notice, these first 4 listings here all say ads. So yeah, they're gonna, all of these places here can help you calculate mortgage, but they are also in the mortgage business trying to get your business. They want you to get a mortgage with them. How long is the term for a mortgage? Anybody know? Oh, Brianna says life. Makes it sound like a prison sentence. It's actually not, but it might seem that way when you're younger, for sure. Because the typical mortgage, the standard mortgage is for 30 years. Now there are other forms of mortgages that can be paid off in 15 years, but you're gonna get the same benefit of a 15-year mortgage if you have a 30-year mortgage, but you pay on it twice a month. And what's the advantage of having a shorter mortgage term? What's that going to mean for you financially? Less interest. You are on it. Way to go. That's exactly right. So here's a typical example in this one mortgage calculator. This is one that popped up. If you have to mortgage $100,000, that's what you're borrowing, 3.92%, and your mortgage is spread over 30 years. Your monthly payment, $473. That's not so bad. Seems pretty cheap, actually. But that's not going to be the total of what you pay every month to the bank. Do you know what else the bank's going to include in your monthly payment? Taxes, property tax, right? Typically insurance, right? They're going to require, and a lot of times they initiate getting hazard insurance, property insurance, because they're loaning you money. They're taking a risk on you, and they don't want the house to burn down, because if you bail out on the mortgage, if you lose your job and have to go into default, they still want a house there that they can go back and sell. Or even if it burns, they want to be able to have it rebuilt so that their investment, because that's what the mortgage companies are doing. They're actually investing in you as a property owner. So look at the total cost of this mortgage here, though, over 30 years, $170,213. So over 30-year period, you're going to pay $70,000 in interest. And $100,000 house is probably not, I mean, that's not a very big house. That's, 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath, maybe 2-bedroom, 2-bath. It's not a big house. You can find them if you look. They're out there, but it's not, you're not going to get much for that. It's going to be better than renting, though, because now those property taxes that you're paying, you can write off on your income tax every year. Your mortgage interest, you can write that off. So the U.S. government has built in incentives for people to buy homes. The housing, they say the housing industry runs our economy. In fact, yeah, Brianna?
This is my opinion, but I feel like renting a house or like anything like renting anything is kind of a waste of money because your money's not going to leave. You're not going to own it after.
I don't know if you guys could hear that, but Brianna's comment is that renting seems like a waste of money because you don't end up owning anything. And that is true. Sometimes that's all you can do, though. If your credit's bad, you don't have any savings to put down as a down payment, you're kind of stuck renting. Unless you can convince the owner of the property to rent it to you with, rent to buy basis, where a portion of your monthly rent goes towards paying on the mortgage. Those are available occasionally, but in today's market, a seller's market, nobody is probably really going to want to do that very much, because why would they mess with that if they can just sell it outright and there's all this competition? But renting, I think everybody starts off renting. You do get a renter's deduction on Indiana state income taxes, but not on federal. So there's a little bit of a break that you get on your income taxes if you rent, but it's not not nearly what you would see as a homeowner with a mortgage. So for comparison, what if we change this to a 15-year mortgage? Okay, look at the total cost of the mortgage now. It went from $170,213 to $132,423. So you saved yourself $38,000 in interest by cutting the length of the mortgage in half. But look at the monthly payment.
And that's how,
Right, you still have your taxes and insurance to pay on top of that. So now your mortgage, your monthly payment went from $473 a month to $736 a month. Can you afford that? I don't know, maybe. Most people tend to go for the longer term mortgage and the lower monthly rate. Because there's a trade-off there, right? The longer the term is, the more interest you're going to pay. The shorter the term, the more your monthly payment's going to be. So I guess pick your poison in a sense, you know, which do you want? Which is going to be better for your situation? Questions so far?
can you do longer than 30?
Can you do longer than 30? I don't think so. I don't think there are. Somebody might have a 40-year mortgage or something like that out there, a mortgage product like that, but I'm not familiar with it.
The only reason why I'm asking is because, you know how last time I talked about my grandparents living in their house for like 33 years?
Uh-huh.
Well, their house is still not paid off.
They probably did some refinancing.
Mhm.
Maybe they got a mortgage at 7 or 8% interest, and halfway through because what's been happening with mortgage rates is they've been falling. They're very, very low right now. So if you can get refinance and get a lower interest rate, you're going to save yourself a bunch of money on interest, even if it means you extend the loan out again to back to 30 years. People and the refinance industry is huge. So some of it's just like paper shuffling, but that might be what they did, or maybe they got a home equity loan, for instance. You know what a home equity is? See that when you put down 20% to buy a house, that's considered like if it's $100,000 house, you put down 20,000. That's 1/5 of the value of that house, right? So that's your equity. That's you.
They build now.
Okay, but I'm just using these numbers as an example. The equity, that's your ownership. You own that free and clear. You don't have to pay the bank for that. You're still paying off the 80,000 that's for the rest of the value of the house. And so the longer you're there, the more you pay into that bank, because a portion of every payment, some of it goes to principal. So it's paying down that 80,000. That's building more equity, more part of your ownership. And at the end of the thing, you hardly have any interest to pay at all, and it's almost all principal. At the beginning, it's the opposite. Mostly interest, not much principal. So you can build equity in a home over 10, 15 years. Maybe now they only owe 40,000 on their mortgage. So there's $60,000 in value that they can borrow against. That's what a home equity loan does. It borrows against that value that they've already paid off. it's kind of double dipping for the bank too, because they've already mortgaged it. Now they're going to give you a second loan, a home equity loan, that's based on what you've already paid off in essence. But for most people, that's no big deal, because you're gonna pay it all off when you decide to move and sell the house anyway. A lot of home equity loans don't even need to be paid off because they're secured by the property. The bank knows they're going to get paid whenever the property gets sold. It's still protected by insurance. Banks making money off interest, they're going to make some money off of it one day, or one way or the other. I mean, that's what they do. That's their job. It's a great question. Okay, the third thing that they're recommending to do before you start shopping for a house is to do what they call pre-qualify. Get yourself pre-qualified. Go talk to a lender. You know, right now on the internet and on television, you've probably seen ads for a company called Rocket Mortgage. That's what they're all about. Pre-qualifying gives you an advantage in a seller's market over people that have not already at least gone through the process. Because when you pre-qualify, the bank's going to look at your income, they're going to look at your credit score, they're going to look at how much money you have in savings, how much other debt that you have. I mean, they're going to go through all of that and determine if you're even a customer that they want to do business with. And if you pass all those tests, you know, so that can take a month. If you pass all the bank's tests, they're going to, at the end of it, they're going to say, okay, we're going to pre-qualify you for a loan up to $150,000, for instance, just to throw a number out there. So, okay, now you're ahead of the game, because you can go make an offer on a house and you know the bank's going to approve the loan. You don't have to go through a guessing game or a waiting game, make an offer. Oh, is the bank going to approve us? In a seller's market, you can't afford to waste a month while the bank goes through that whole process on your behalf. Somebody else has already gotten pre-qualified, I guarantee it, in this market. So to be competitive, you got to do that. Get pre-qualified. And I'm not here endorsing Rocket Mortgage, but they're probably one of the big ones now that's really pushing this. Pre-qualifying also will help you have a really good handle on what it is that you can afford, because you might go, I mean, you're going to go look at a lot of houses. You work with a realtor, maybe they're showing you around. Realtors make money based on commission, you know, based on the value of the home. So they're going to push your limits as much as they can, because they're going to make more money on the sale. And the worst thing that can happen is you fall in love with a piece of property, a home that's just perfect, it's got a nice yard, blah, 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 whatever your requirements are. And then you get to look at the price and it's $170,000 and you're only pre-qualified for $150,000. Disappointment sets in. You want that house. How can you make it work? You know, people go through all kinds of gyrations to figure out that sort of thing. So if you're not pre-qualified, you can get trapped in that sort of cycle. If you're pre-qualified for $150,000 and the realtor says that's a $170,000 house, I'd be saying, let's not go look at that. We can't afford that right now. So you can exercise some self-discipline, in a sense, in what you look at in order to make sure that you find something that fits within your budget, because now that pre-qualified number that's going to become part of your budget. You know, you might have been paying $500 a month on rent. And if you're pre-qualified for a $150,000 mortgage, how much is that over 30 years? 150, 100, what?
180, I'm guessing.
Let's just say it's a flat 3% and we're doing it for 30 years. No, you would have guessed a little too low there. The total is 227,666. But your monthly payment's 632. And right now you're paying $500 a month for rent. Well, if you are, you're probably not living in Hamilton County because there's not very, I don't think there are any $500 a month rentals. But that's pretty cheap monthly payment if you can get it. And a nice house perhaps, depending on where you go. So pre-qualify, that's step number 3 in all of this whole process. Okay, the thing about housing and the fact that so many people believe that the housing market really drives our economy is it's tempting, especially for people that are in the industry. It's they want to sell homes. They want to get the product out there. The banks want to sell mortgages. The builders want to sell homes. The real estate developers want to sell land to the builders. And then on top of that, then you got not HH Gregg, but because they're gone, but Best Buy that wants to sell refrigerators and stoves and you know, all the other stuff that goes into a new house. I mean, think about everything that the housing industry generates in our economy. Well, back around 2004, 2005, 2006, the housing market was red hot. But a lot of people were getting homes that probably didn't qualify for them. And there was a movie made called The Big Short. Some guys figured out what was going on and they bet against the housing market. It's some great acting in it, some well-known people that you'll recognize here. This is the movie trailer for The Big Short.
Michael, how are you? I found something really interesting. The whole housing market is propped up on these bad loans. They will fail. The housing market is rock solid. It's a time bomb.
So Mike Burry, who gets his hair cut supercuts and doesn't wear shoes, knows more than Alan Greenspan.
Dr. Mike Burry, yes, he does.
You know what? I'm pissed off. American people are getting screwed by the big banks. And I'm getting madder and madder.
It's unbelievable.
Then this guy walks into my office and says,
There's some shady stuff going down. All the banks were having a big old party. A few outsiders saw what no one else could. The whole world economy might collapse.
I'm sure the world's banks have more incentives than greed.
You're wrong. No one's paying attention.
the banks got greedy and we can profit off of their stupidity.
You want to bet against the banks?
I think we're either high or having a stroke. Kind of brilliant.
Fraud has never ever worked. Eventually, things go south. When the hell did we forget all that?
How can the banks let this happen? It's fueled by stupidity.
That's not stupidity, that's fraud.
Tell me the difference between stupid and illegal, and I'll have my wife's brother arrested.
You have any idea what you just did? You just bet against the American economy.
If you're wrong, you can lose it all. the banks and defrauded the American people. Now we can kick them in the teeth.
Okay, here we go. We target strippers. It's bad loans.
Mm-hmm. No, cash, Rich.
Woo, not going to be able to refinance.
On all my loans,
What do you mean all your loans?
I have 5 houses and a condo.
5 houses and a condo. Did you see the look on his face when she said that? It's just utter bewilderment. How could that happen? And that it is a true story. These guys made millions. And I don't know if you remember what was going on in our economy in around 2006, 7, and 8. The recession was here. Oh, you were so young. Well, I got caught up in the middle of that whole crash. I was working for a land developer, a national home building company that was developing land, and I was their land development manager. I helped build 5 subdivisions in 15 months, putting in streets, sewers, getting the lots ready and everything else. And then and that was 2005, from May 2005 to Labor Day 2006, I got laid off along with 6 other people the day before Labor Day weekend because they saw the crash coming and they were not developing any more land. And eventually they left the market. I'm not even sure they're still in existence anymore. And there was a lot of housing companies that went that route. And then what happened? The Obama administration comes in, worst recession in years, and they start coming up with incentive programs through the federal government. A lot of the similar kind of things that you've seen here recently to help stimulate the economy through the pandemic were done back in 2008 and 2009 to help communities get back on their feet. And the banks really, like they said, took it on the chin. So it's the housing market and the people that are involved in it can have a huge impact on what's going on with our economy. Thankfully, that has led to a lot of reforms in the mortgage industry. Yeah. The Big Short. Yeah, it's fun. I went and saw it in the theater when it first came out. It's not for everybody, but the actors are great in it. Steve Carell, Brad Pitt, Christian Bale. I mean, can hardly go wrong with those folks. All right, everybody at some point will be dealing with buying a home, perhaps. Can you think of are there any negatives about buying a home? I don't know that it's really a negative per se. If you were going to list pros and cons, though, some of the pros, the things that are advantages might be, you give your family some stability. You know what schools they're going to. You do get some tax write-offs. You're really a citizen of the community at that point.
My scare is like when I get older and I am ready to purchase a house, I don't know what's going to happen in that 30 years of having that house. I don't know if I'm going to lose my job or, you know what I mean? Like, I'm coming to like a problem with money. And that's probably like the scariest part.
Yeah. And that's true for everybody. It is scary to think about that sort of long-term financial commitment because lots of stuff can happen. I mean, I've lost jobs a couple of times while owning a mortgage, owning a house. But if you let that sort of drive your life, though, it can really create a lot of anxiety. And so, as you go along in your career, hopefully that's going to go well, and you'll have more confidence about making that sort of financial commitment, because that's what it really comes down to.
also may just be scary because I'm so young. I'm only 18.
Yeah.
so-
Yeah, that seems like a long time. That's longer than you've been alive then if you're just
Yeah.
18. Much longer. But it also points out maybe one of the cons to buying a house, because if you decide you want to move to a different city and take a different job, now you got a house to sell. You know, what happens if the market collapses? You know, you move into this neighborhood thinking it's going to be, you know, a certain level of homes, et cetera, and then the developer gets in trouble and starts putting anything in there. You can't control a lot of the stuff that goes on around you in the market. And, you know, like you said, it can be a financial burden if you lose your job or something else happens that you couldn't have predicted. You know, it's just one of those life things that you end up being forced to deal with. You know, the biggest problem with buying a house is you lose some of your flexibility in terms of mobility. That's why, you know, most people don't really typically buy a home until they're probably close to 30, 25 to 30. Because then you're starting to feel a little bit better about where your life's going, what you want to do with the rest of your life, where you want to live. You know, but if you don't have any idea about any of those things and you want to keep your options open, then renting is going to be the best way to go. Because at the end of the lease, you can be out of there. Right? You're not tied down for 30 years. It might only be a year. So in the handouts, in the materials, is this thing that's titled Car Loan Project. It's there for notes. It's not an assignment. We've kind of talked about some of these questions already, and we're going to look on cars.com here in a minute and add some actual cars and values and what your loan might be. Yeah.
Will we get extra credit if we turn it in?
Extra credit if you turn it in? Oh, I don't know. If it's super, super good, maybe. Can you wow me with it?
Maybe because I've been looking at cars for the past year.
Oh, you have? Okay, well, you maybe got a leg up on everybody else then. So maybe you'll have some examples that we can use here also. Right? Okay, so hopefully everybody can see this. Nope, cannot see it yet. Here we go, car loan project. First question, you can probably already anticipate: how will the interest rate affect my monthly payment? Well, if you have bad credit or you go to one of those buy here, pay here lots, you guys have seen those around Noblesville, I bet you. If you go down south on 10th Street, which turns into Allisonville Road, there's a couple of them just south of that circle down there that they built. Higher interest rates, that's going to increase your monthly payment. How will the length of the loan affect monthly payment? Well, just like the housing example, the longer the loan, the more interest you're going to pay, but it might reduce your monthly payment. You'll be paying on it much longer, right? And for cars are depreciable. They typically don't increase in value. I mean, Brianna says that's why there's no point in buying a new car. And a lot of people would agree with you on that, because as soon as you drive that new car off the dealer's lot, the value has dropped.
You can buy your car with like 500 miles on for like brand new for like $5,000 cheaper.
And that's because of depreciation. Yep. Houses, on the other hand, usually increase in value. So while a car is an asset, it's not the same kind of asset that a house is. I mean, unless you have a 67 Corvette Fastback or a 57 Chevy or some, you know, old hot rod thing that's been renovated, like you see on Meekum's, you know, car auction shows, those cars are valuable because somebody has restored them and put a lot of money into them. But the average person isn't going to buy a car like that. You're just going to go someplace where you trust a dealer. You found a car that you like, and you buy it. And you know, if it's a 6 or 8 year old car, maybe your lender will only give you a 3-year loan. Brand new cars, gosh, I don't think the morning news programs would survive without the car dealer ads. You know, 72 months, zero financing, $1,500 cash back, you know, blah, blah, blah. So many different options that the car dealers throw at you to sell the new cars. That's their job. That's their business. They want to sell new cars. So there's all kinds of incentives they throw at people for that. So the next section here talks about looking at cars.com and looking at some examples. And then we can play with the interest rate and the length of the term. The question is this for used cars or for both?
For new and
And used or new?
I think that works.
It depends. What are you trying to achieve?
But I was asking, like, can we pick any car?
Sure. It's just an exercise. Cars.com is one of the websites that I would encourage you to look at if you are shopping for a car, because you can find basically anything that you want. And even if it's not something that you're ready to buy right then, you can get an idea about values. Right now, because now you're circling back to a budget consideration. How much can I afford? So when I first pulled this up here, it's got in the search area set up for used cars of any make or model, 20 miles from 46060. That's right here in Noblesville. Well, why would I pick $6,000? Maybe that's all I can afford. Okay. So what kind of a car does that give us? If we're talking about a $6,000 used car,
I got a 2010 Honda Accord, and it's really nice.
2010 Honda Accord,
It was 64 then.
6,400. Well, maybe you can negotiate with the car dealer. Maybe you can get them down to 6,000. I mean, that's the thing. The other thing about car dealers, they will negotiate. And with so much information now on the internet, cars.com, think about any Kelley Blue Book, tons of different websites out there have Carfax. Everybody's got information at their fingertips now that didn't exist 20 years ago when you were buying a car.
Well, we didn't really negotiate. It was a great deal for the car. My dad tried, but they wouldn't budge.
Ah, okay. So if you look at this search thing here, I can hone this down a little bit more. Because what comes up right away? A 2003 Honda Pilot for $3,500. It seems like a good deal. World Class Motors. Well, that's right here in Noblesville somewhere. Would you buy that Honda Pilot or not? Anybody? Anybody? Too old. Look at the mileage.
I'd buy it.
224,763 miles.
It looks like a nice car though.
Uh-huh. Do you know somebody that's a mechanic that could look it over for you?
My dad.
Oh, there you go. See, that's a different situation. I love to drive, but I can't do anything mechanical. So don't ask me to go change the oil, or I couldn't tell you if something's wrong or not. I can feel it. I can feel it if I'm driving and there's something wrong, but I can't do anything about fixing it. So I would steer clear of a problem car like that because of the age and because of the mileage. Because I'm thinking, gosh, something might go wrong. I'll drive it off the lot and the front axle might break or something. You know, who knows? So here's a newer car, 2010 Ford Focus, just below our limit, 5995, 122,000 miles. That's better mileage. What's that? Okay. So in the search over here, let's narrow this down. We don't want to go below 4,000. So that ought to kick out some of these really, really old vehicles. There's that same Ford Focus. You can maybe get a Chevy Cruze, Ford Escape. That's a small little SUV. It's not bad. Jeep Compass. But, you know, I'm a Honda guy. I just want to know what Hondas are out there right now. Well, there's another 2003 Honda Pilot. That's a lot more. It's a different car shop, Main Street Motors. It's got 30,000 less miles. I wouldn't pay $3,000 more though for only 30,000 less miles. Really? Okay.
Or, yeah, the fair price isn't good. That's the lowest. They're like great deals.
I don't know. I'd rather have that CRV than Pilot. There's a 08 Accord. Accords will last a long time, and look at the mileage on that though, 255,000. So there's a theme here that's starting to emerge.
Well, mine had 174, and that's really, really good for Honda.
Yeah. I had an Acura Integra, a 99 Integra. I bought it with 100,000 miles on it, and I traded it in at 233,000 miles. And the only reason I traded it was because it was getting to the point where I needed to basically either upgrade or fix all the suspension, shocks, bushings, all that stuff that would, you know, where the wheels would fall off or something. Because I drove it hard, and I put a lot of miles on it. I love that car, but it was a great little car. It didn't bother me that it had 100,000 to start with because I'm familiar with those kind of cars. Just like you got one with some pretty good mileage on it. See, I can't boast that advantage at all. Honest.
My grandpa is like when my dad was growing up, my grandpa used to show like older cars. So my dad kind of grew up like fixing cars and watching my grandpa fixing stuff.
So I wish I had those kind of skills, and I got cousins that do all that kind of stuff, but I can't. I just never. I can handle wood and drywall and paint and stuff like that, but nothing mechanical. So really the big, for a $6,000 car, the biggest things here are going to be age and mileage, right? You take one of these cars out and test drive it, which you absolutely should. You know, what are some of the things that you might feel that would turn you off? Well, does the car drift? Does it pull to the left or to the right when you're going down a flat road? Do you smell anything funny when you get out of the car after the engine's heated up a little bit? Stuff like that you got to run from, because there's some other mechanical problem. But maybe in Brianna's case, she knows people that can fix it. So that might give her some negotiating leverage. So $6,000 car. $6,000 car. Interest rate pretty low. The problem with an older car, though, is most of the time the banks are not going to go out more than 3 years. Most people can afford $174 a month if you're going to buy a used car like that.
Also, the dealership that we got it from, they have a warranty where like if the engine for some reason just breaks, they'll pay for it and fix it.
A lot of used cars don't have any kind of warranty, though. So some dealerships will add on a warranty, 90 days warranty. That's not going to be.
Well, I think it was for like 5 years.
Well, that's probably something that would have had to pay extra for if it's
Yeah.
5 years on a used car, because most used cars are sold as is.
Mhm.
So if you buy it and you drive it off the lot and something happens to it, you're stuck. It's, sorry about your luck, but that's just the way that it goes on an as is sale. So I don't know if you noticed this when I first opened this up, but the number that was in here for the car loan amount was $25,000. So if you bought a $25,000 car and you paid it over a period of 5 years, now your monthly payment's up to almost $450. If we go back to our other example, let's say your credit's not very good, and instead of 3% interest, you got to pay 7%. Okay, now your payment's gone up about $10 a month. Your total interest has gone up too. And a lot of times, if you've got money, you can get more favorable terms. That's one of the sort of the catch-22s of financing. People that got money have no trouble getting more stuff. People that need things sometimes struggle with it. So if you wanted to pay off this loan here, $25,000 car in only 3 years, now your payments jumped from $450 to $727 a month. So where does leasing fit into all of this?
You can't leave with that credit, can you? Or no credit.
You can't lease with bad credit? Probably not. I would,
Or no credit.
or no credit, yeah. Now,
But you can't lease used cars, can you?
typically used cars are not for lease. And a lease is like renting. A lease is like renting.
But then you can buy after.
Yeah, as long as you don't drive it into the ground and wear it out during the period of your lease. And because every lease has a mileage limitation on it. I would never be able to handle a lease because most of them don't allow you to drive more than like 12,000 miles a year. I've been averaging 20,000 miles a year on my car since I bought it. So I do a lot of long distance driving. So I just changed my search here now to include cars up to $25,000. I still want to stick with Honda, but got all kinds of options, new and used, if you can afford to spend that kind of money. If it's just a Honda, now you're talking about 2018 model, very low mileage. 2017 CRV, Civic, 13,000 miles. That's about as cheap as you're going to get a Civic, 17,500 for that new. That's not even really 3 years old. That's probably a car that got turned back in at the end of a lease because the miles are low. And that's one good thing about buying a car that's come off a lease is people generally got to take care of them, because if they don't, they're going to have to pay for repairs before the car dealership's going to accept that vehicle back off the end of the lease. So they've got incentives built in there for you as a person leasing a car to take good care of it.
What Honda do you have?
I have a Civic Si Coupe. Mine has a 6-speed manual transmission, VTEC engine. It's a nice little car. Okay, anybody got any questions about the car loan situation or leasing or any of that sort of thing? Make sure you do your research. That's the biggie, my big recommendation on all those kind of purchases. And one more thing I want to check here. All right, so there's other information to consider when you're talking about buying a car. Gosh, nobody wants to have an accident, but it can happen. And so there are sites like this out there that can help you understand what the cost of repair is going to be. Some cars are just going to be more expensive to fix than others. That's just the bottom line. So the average liability claim for property damage in 2013 was $3,231. Lots of interesting statistics in here. Alcohol-related crashes, speeding, red light running, fatigue, distracted driving. That's a huge issue these days. Cell phone use. So that's why they've kind of come up with these laws for hands-free. The other thing to consider is safety.
Does not have a sound, Jay, because I can hear.
No, there's not. Not
Okay.
on this one. She asked if there was supposed to be sound with this video. Does it seem strange to you that just this little rear end collision here would cause this? Well, this is actual footage from crash testing back in 1978. You got a 71 Chevy Impala, great big heavy car with big steel bumpers, running into the back of a 1972 Ford Pinto. Well, the problem with those Pintos was that the gas tank was basically exposed in a rear end collision. So you don't ever obviously want to buy a car like that. But you also, especially now, every car's got airbags. You know, these are things that have evolved over the last 40, 50 years. Heck, when I was a kid, there were not even seat belts in the cars. People didn't like wearing them once they first came out. Yeah, we used to sit in the back window above the seats. Sure. Or sitting in the back of the in the station wagon with the rear seat facing backwards with the window open. Yeah. What's the big deal? What could happen? Nobody seemed to ever worry about it until bad things started happening. The Chevy Corvair, which was a rear engine car, don't see those hardly anymore. That got outlawed. The Pinto, they were done for after these crash test reports started coming out. Ford quit making those. They had to. And so now, if you're thinking about buying a car, it's not just, is it nice to drive and does it look nice, et cetera? Is it going to get you from point A to point B? Look at all the plastics that are used in cars now, the crash bumpers and the crushable structures, all this safety stuff that has been instituted in cars. Initially, a lot of the steel was removed to make the cars lighter so that they could get better fuel mileage, but they discovered that also had some negative consequences in terms of survivability and crashes. So they've had to, the designers have had to work with the safety people and the federal government to make sure that all this stuff got looked at all at the same time. So a long-lasting car, one that's relatively inexpensive to repair if you do get in an accident, one that has a good safety record, you know, those are all things to consider. It's not just about price anymore at that point. You know, if you're talking about, you know, driving you and your family around and your kids or whatever, it's about all these other things also. So that's it for today, guys. Just buying a house, buying a car, looking at the numbers and looking at the issues. Any questions or comments?
No, thank you.
All right, Jessica.
Friday.